And hello and welcome back to Trails of Books, or whatever I'm calling this technically. It's been a while since I recorded the last one, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to probably adjust a little bit of how I go about these based on feedback as we go along. But in general, it's been a bit since I actually recorded the last one. Sort of reminding me why I didn't read these in the first place. Not that I don't enjoy them, it just takes me to be in the right mood to get back to them. So, let's do that. As a reminder, I have played up to Trails of Cold Steel 3, all the games before then, so my reactions will include spoilers from stuff before that and up to the end of Trails of Cold Steel 3. This book in particular, Heartless Edgar, is from Cold Steel 3. I wanted to do the newest one. I don't know if I said any. I wanted to do the newest one first. I wanted to do the newest one as one of the first ones I did, so let's jump into it. Well, that's certainly an interesting way to start it. So our main character is Edgar, then. The title character, and he's heartless. And this seems to be developing like a romance story? Huh. It's interesting, we're in Le Mans. I actually checked the timeline dates. 1294, that's like 90, 80 years in the future. It is in universe fiction, so obviously it's not like transcribing events that actually happened. At the very least, like Carnelia was, even if people didn't know that when reading the book. Overall, though, I would say one of my first reactions is that this feels like it flows better. Maybe because there's more dialogue. It's just the sort of actual type of reading that I think appeals to me a little bit more. Just because it feels like it flows. Like, Carnelia wasn't horrible. It was well written, and I liked some of the flares to the writing, but it's not the sort of thing, it's the sort of thing that can drag on a bit more in my head, at the very least. I'm not a big reader, obviously, so just one of those things. You know, I sort of wonder. Edgar seems a bit on the awkward side, obviously, at minimum. Then again, when I think about the title being Heartless Edgar, I almost wonder if maybe he's not actually in love with her. This chapter, it's like between last chapter, this chapter made it seem more likely, but I almost wonder if he's not in love with her, but rather he thinks he should be in love with her or something like that, maybe? Maybe that's what the Heartless is going to be or something like that. And he's just like acting how he thinks he should or something like that for like the 5th time. In general though, Edgar, yeah, he's quite on the awkward side. His whole confrontation and like his idea of, oh, what should I do? I should hold her in my arms. It's like, you barely know her. That's just imagine if he like handled this on his own. Oh my. That thug wasn't much better either. My goodness. Basically stereotypical thug at that point. Completely there to be a plot point. But yeah, sort of worked in the end. I'll be interested to see, it's obviously a romance is blossoming, and in some way or form that's going to develop into something, I imagine there's some twist involving the Heartless aspect of it, basically. So, Chapter 3. A nice chapter. I've been watching the sitcom Community lately, and I have to say Edgar sort of reminds me of Abed from that. Sort of like, he doesn't really get other people that well, and he's a bit awkward as a result of it, but he's, sincere, and he's trustworthy and that sort of stuff. Also, props to Henry for calling bracers, though notably, it is sort of weird they got there like so quickly after that. It must have been right nearby. It's always very interesting how bracers tend to basically be the police in countries that they're trusted, like Liberal and whatnot. They are basically the police there. I know Crossbow had its own police system, but that had more to do with a lack of a proper military and whatnot. Because like Liberal had the military and bracers basically, and that was the extent of it. Ereboni sort of pushed the bracers out so they have like a bunch of stuff and super militarized and etc, etc. It does make me wonder how well that might work in the real world. Just as a system where the actual police forces are not controlled by the government itself, and their entire purpose is in order to protect the people and stuff like that. That sort of thing. I wonder how that would change the dynamic. Because it's hard to deny that in the real world, police tend to let the power go to their head in a lot of ways. Obviously, no overall generalization, but there's enough there that it causes problems at an institutional level. Especially in terms of reporting and stuff like that. So I almost wonder if just the change of perspective to something where their highest priority is not law and order, it's protect the people, how much that could change the dynamic there and stuff. I live in the US, so at the time of recording this, it's a pretty hot topic at the moment. Hoping for reform myself, but Clementine seems sweet. She seems like she was made basically to be perfect for someone as awkward as Edgar, so I'm not really sure what make of these flashbacks that it seemed to transition to in the end again. They seem like flashbacks, don't they? Or maybe they're like predictions of the future, because the original one made it almost sound like he was in a relationship or something like that. Or he was seeing from someone else's perspective, maybe? I suppose that's not impossible in the Trails universe. we have enough aspects of mental connections and manipulation that the idea that memories and stuff like that could be passed from one person to another, maybe, that doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility at the very least. I will say I'm a little confused by a few things in this one. So starting from the beginning, I knew the firefly mushrooms in Lelocale, or Local, I forget, sound familiar. The fireflies were apparently from like the very first quest with that guy Orvid who did all those recipe stuff in Sky in first chapter. It was like really early on, so that was a thing. So that's cool. And then the training ground in Le Mans, since we're in Le Mans and whatnot. I will say, when Edgar turned and just went to leave after being given the mushroom, that actually made me laugh properly out loud. That was pretty good. He has so little common sense. I was mentioning earlier that I wonder, like, maybe he doesn't have proper human emotions or something like that. He could be something where just like he's a little off. Not that it's necessarily wrong, but he's just like not experiencing human emotions in the way that he should be, basically. So, sort of like I said, he reminded me of Abed. And a big part of him is that he doesn't understand people, he doesn't get those cues properly. There's a lot of common sense aspects he doesn't get in Community. And that's a big part of his character for comedy, as well as general people liking him and stuff like that. His charm, in a way. So, I do sort of wonder if it's like that, where there's just a lot that he just doesn't get, just because he's like that. Maybe the love is part of that too. I wonder. I will say, the whole thing with Henry seemed really fucking weird. 'Cause, like, he went out there dressed as an old man. Why? Like, even as a friend, let's say you decide to play a prank, you brought a wig with you. Why did he want the mushrooms, too? Why was he so desperate on that? That whole scene just felt really weird. And that's about my opinion on it. Okay, chapter 5. Not really much to say on this one. We have learned that Edgar is the villain because they're out fishing now. They even got people from the fishing cults. Yeah, just a lot of fishing stuff. And the most interesting thing I took out of that was Edgar saying, "I don't know why I like her," which sort of feeds me into my speculation from before that maybe he's just acting like he should like her. Like he doesn't have that feeling. He just thinks that he's in love, so he's doing what he thinks he should do or something like that. Well, next chapter then, because I really don't have much to say on this one. And hello and sort of welcome back, because I sort of took a break, like a week, before coming back to this. These are interesting, but they do start to wear on you if you try to just read everything in a row. That's something I sort of learned from the Carnelia stuff, and I decided to try to give a break in between for this one. And I think it worked, because I'm back into it just as interested. So, I will say, Edgar sort of reminds me of Altina. And given the nature of Homunculus and all that sort of stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if he was that sort of thing. And given the fact that, like, Carnelli and whatnot is not the most reliable source for everything that happened accurately to the historical aspect of it, maybe Edgar is even a real person, or a real homunculus or something. And this is just, like, some telling of a story that he had or something like that. I've actually finished. I mentioned before that I've been watching Community, and he reminded me of Abed from that. I've actually finished Community now, and he still really reminds me of Abed in a lot of ways. In this chapter, the thing that really interests me the most is the sounds of the memory, which almost sounds like a memory of the future. All these cutaways to the tomato stuff and whatnot, and it almost sounds like two people that are just like having a happy exchange between each other for a lot of them as well. There are time elements in the series, and a lot of my speculation in the series has gone to the conclusion that the actual mind, the soul, the memories of people are the sort of things that can be actually extracted and are a part of that whole, like, orbal energy system sort of stuff, my whole theory of everything concept and stuff like that. So, it's not exactly like those things are detached and different from all that as well. So if you have time involved, I wonder if you could get a memory from the future and whatnot. That would be very interesting, wouldn't it? Oh, and when I say that maybe this is like an inaccurate retelling of it, it is like long into the future, right? So maybe that's just part of it, in terms of how it's inaccurate per se, you know? Okay, Chapter 7. Well, that ended on a note. Here, I'll start from the beginning of the notes I took during the chapter. So it's from Clementine's perspective, which is interesting. It definitely seems to imply that involving the stuff at the end, it's not involving her at the very least. Which is a bit Well, there was the mention of the installed memories before. If it involves her, who knows? Maybe she's also. But yeah, I'll go into that a little bit later. I can't say I recognize the names Bello or Boris. I imagine we'll go to Le Mans outside of the whole training stuff later on. If there are extents, like Le Mans is such an important part of the world, it would be weird if we never go there for Epstein Foundation stuff in like later games and such. I made a note here, and obviously it's answered in the actual chapter. Something is up with him if he's being taken to like a research area. Probably having to do with the chapter title of No Blood to Bleed, which they answer by the end of, okay, he's an android. Interesting. We did see the dolls from Ren that were able to act and behave like that, so it's not exactly like it's technology that is beyond what we've seen outside of maybe the whole lack of an actual soul and whatnot, but we've seen that too from like Potter Modder and whatnot, where we've seen that sort of stuff develop. Oh, and Valimar and stuff like that. That technology exists. It's interesting that it seems to... Well, this is fiction too. But it needs to mean something, right? If it's one of these books in the series, so... It's very interesting, at the very least. And also, interestingly, it does a decent job of... how to phrase it? Fitting within my general speculation about how the world works, so... I always like when I see more evidence of that. It's always nice. Boy, does this chapter bring up some interesting questions in the lore of the world. So Edgar was introduced as someone working at the Foundation, right? Apparently he also knew that he was a robot, basically. If he ultimately knew and all that sort of stuff, and if Henry knew and whatnot, then yeah, everyone was basically just in on it except Clementine. And unless, maybe she's another one. He said that she was randomly chosen as someone. So it's an interesting paradigm. It's interesting that they'd even tell her, basically. This seems like stuff they really wouldn't want to tell her. They could have just said, he died, or something like that. Change his appearance, change his memories, and sent him back out there, or something like that. Let her grieve over it, if they really wanted to have this super secret sort of stuff. So it's interesting, so I almost wonder if maybe she's another one, and they're trying to keep up the facade. Because I never really got... I guess if Edgar knew, then I guess Clementine should know if she was involved, right? Probably the most interesting part is the whole... probably the most interesting part to me is that there's been advancements recently, as they said. Again, I'm sort of taking this... Yes, it's set in the future, but I'm sort of taking it as a not so necessarily accurate retelling of something that actually happens in, like, the relatively recent past, given the developments. And there have been a lot of things in the recent sort of world that involve the human mind, and there's just like aspects of it that trickle out. Most notably the cult stuff with Ren and whatnot, yeah? Where you have stuff like Potter Modder, we already discussed where he developed basically beyond that. Sort of like they said Edgar did here, right? But with like Ren herself, the whole cult experiment, there's a huge aspect of it with Kia and stuff like that, where it literally is just melding minds and consciousness into one. So, you gotta wonder, is it actually real artificial intelligence? Or are they, like, putting together the building blocks of consciousness? Like, in my theory of everything, I basically say the consciousness of the soul, stuff like that, is built between time, mirage. Like you have mirage in order to give consciousness, and then you add in time and space in order to give spatial and time awareness, which allows you to experience the world. And your soul and personhood comes from that, right? So the idea that you could have a mixture of that makes up you, your soul, your consciousness, your memories, that sort of stuff. If I'm right about that, then that's why people like Ren was able to absorb the other people she was at in the cult experiments and whatnot, and use their personalities to keep herself sane until they eventually like were absorbed into her subconscious. And stuff like Kia being able to absorb all those sacrifices over the years to become that magnanimous personality that they wanted as their basic like goddess in a sense, right? In order to be the core of the Septarian and such. Edgar even dreams. So honestly, this feels... It's hard to say if it's connected to all that, because it feels like there are parallels, like I mentioned with Potter Mater. It's hard to say how much it's connected to that, how much they know, because like I said, there's been a lot of advances with that recently. Like actual, like, events that they can learn from and develop the stuff off of, maybe. So, yeah, there has been a lot of that, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this is actually a thing. And it's sort of rephrased in a way to artificial intelligence. Maybe it isn't even, maybe in real life he's not even actually a robot, and it's just like, hey, maybe there's an actual Edgar who maybe was like, homunculus, or a doll, or something else like that. Something equivalent to Potter Mater, or one of the dolls Ren had to like pretend to be her parents, and they gave it basically a personality and stuff like that. And this is just the novel's way of basically making it seem less believable or something like that, or not really get to the truth while still telling the story of something that happened. It's really interesting, actually, just from a lore perspective. Mind you, I do feel for Clementine. That would just be a massive thing to be dropped on you. I sort of feel like it's not actually gonna go through with this big, wiping of his memory and whatnot. It feels like Edgar's basically playing Henry like a fiddle a little bit with the friendship stuff, bringing out his true emotions and whatnot. I really do like the agency Edgar has, given his situation. And that seems like the thing that they're, finding a problem with. Developing self-consciousness means that he's too much to handle. Yeah, so basically once they become alive, yeah. It's a pretty classic trope for this sort of story in the end. It is interesting that the memories he had were from her childhood. A lot of them really felt like they were Edgar and her having a loving back and forth. I guess it would make sense if there was like like he said, like there were the hopes, and somehow his imagination got like filled in the blanks to some of those memories, I guess. And he managed to get, like, identical wording to some of the stuff in real life, just because she was probably parroting something that she had said in the past. That sort of thing. Hence why he was able to predict the specific thing, and she was like, yeah, that's how I would have said it. That sort of thing. Well, not much to say. I don't really think that it's gonna go through. I feel like he's gonna... I'm hoping he's basically gonna abscond in the night and with Henry's, blessing basically, to go with Clementine and find somewhere else they can live in, happiness and whatnot. Well, here's hoping at least. A little bit of a sudden ending. That seems to be a theme that's developing through the ones I've read so far. But hey, they get there sort of happily ever after. I'm actually surprised that they made a deal with the, that they were able to actually make a deal with the Foundation. It is sort of sad that he went through with it. It seems like Henry probably had regrets afterwards, and that's why he went to Clementine and showed her the way. I bet he, when he heard about the other guy showing up, he went and found him and then brought him there to help and get that sort of stuff. The fact that they had a request put in so quickly too is probably a good sign as well. There is a bit of an irony to the Fisherman Guild, whatever, being the ones to enable positive things to happen in regards to the minds of people and whatnot. There is a little bit of an irony to that. That someone from that actually developed all that. But yeah, ultimately, it seemed like the actual solution to this was developed really quickly, and if they were really okay with that, I'm surprised they didn't just straight up develop that before. Basically, the fact that the information was out there is probably a big thing. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Henry showed her in order to get the information out there and make it so that there was, in fact, people out there who knew the situation and they couldn't just hide it. Maybe that's why he brought Clementine in and all that sort of stuff. Good old Henry, the true hero of this story. Well, it's good they're going to get their happy ending. I'll be very interested to see if we end up running into them one day. That would be very interesting. It's one of those things that I'm wondering how it's going to develop, and you sort of have very little choice for where you can meet them if they've actively agreed to go and, stay in the town for the rest of their lives, basically. Which is okay. The thing that I expected them to basically, at some point be on the run and be off, pretending to be someone else, in a distant land, and maybe that's where we'd run into them, in the refugees of Calvert or something like that. But alas, it doesn't seem like that'll be the sort of case that's going to happen here. Overall, I found it very interesting. From a lore perspective, the story itself was decent. It was, once things started lining up, it was fairly predictable. The questions I have in my head, the mysteries, have more to do with how it might relate to the actual world in terms of, what the reality of stuff going on is. So that would be interesting to see develop if we ever get strong answers to that. So, I think I'm going to leave it there. Next time, I'm planning to do one from the Crossbell arc. So, I'll see y'all next time. Drive safely, everyone.